Bullish on Bullpups. A Bullpup. Pretty cool concept. Its attributes, its demerits, good Bullpups and bad Bullpups. That's what we're going to discuss today on Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, warfare, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. If you want to support this podcast with a message, consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I'm going to put in a quick abbreviated bio, and then we'll get into Bullpups. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also, law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Melito, and I am blessed to serve you today. What is a bullpup? In my own definition, in my own vernacular, in my own words. It's simply a weapon, usually a rifle, perhaps another kind of weapon, where the receiver, the operating mechanism, is moved back behind the trigger mechanism. Think about shifting the operating system back so it's close to your shoulder, close to your, right under your face. The magazine is far back from where it normally would be on a traditional rifle, shotgun, even handgun, which we might touch on. Consider it like the Porsche of firearms, where the engine is not in the front, but in the back. What's the main appeal of this? Well, a major appeal of this weapon system is that you get a very traditional barrel length in a much shorter overall package. If you take a traditional, let's say, rifle with a 16-inch barrel, a normal modern carbine length barrel, and a standard style rifle, a Mini 14, an AR-15, an AK-47, and you look at a bullpup with a 16-inch barrel, it's going to be far shorter than the traditional carbine. So you get the same barrel length in a shorter package. What's the appeal of that? Well, if you know anything about ballistics, internal ballistics, terminal performance, external ballistics, when you start chopping length off a barrel, in most circumstances, at least in practical cartridges and practical barrel lengths, you reduce the velocity, therefore reducing the energy and arguably the effectiveness of said cartridge. So the bullpup allows you to have that longer barrel and a shorter package. Well, you might ask, why the shorter package? Well, for a lot of in-close fighting, whether that be urban warfare, whether that be vehicle ops, convoy ops, personal protection details. If you listen to the longer version of the bio, you'll know that I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. We taught urban warfare and convoy operations. I also was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. Part of that was mass gatherings. And part of mass gatherings is VIPs. A-list celebrities, politicians. Doing executive protection was part of that job. Not because I particularly valued their life above anybody else's life, but because they drew in large crowds of people. And active shooters generally seek a target-rich environment. Therefore, that was part of my job. Executive protection, vehicle work, all those things. So I'm familiar with the concept, and I see the appeal of the bullpup. And you might be thinking at this point, well, that sounds great. Sign me up. Bullpup everything. But you give up some stuff with a bullpup as well. It's not all pluses and no minuses. You're probably familiar with regular rifle ergonomics, running an AR, running a Mini 14, running a shotgun. Also the way they point and aim. Bullpups differ greatly in that. So I think it's kind of one of those things, if you were going to run a bullpup, you don't necessarily have to marry it, but you have to be very intimate with a bullpup. You have to be really familiar. They don't really work and operate as far as the mechanics of driving that weapon like most other weapons. The reloads are different. The fixing malfunctions are different. Also, there is the matter of having the explosion go off right next to your face. So, it's not all pluses, it's not all minuses, it's a mixed bag. Now, I would like to point you to some really good and not so good bullpups. And I'm going to keep this to modern, readily available bullpups. There are things like the FAMAS or the Walther P2000, which are really cool guns, but I think are outside the reach of most people. They're kind of unicorns. I want to stick with something you could go to a decent-sized gun store, gun shop, and buy. I'm going to start off with what I think is the best one on the market today. It's the one that got me thinking about this episode. I was thinking about this gun, and that spurred the thought of other bullpups. I was actually thinking of a different episode, but it kind of morphed into this. By God's grace, it became an episode. And the one I was thinking of, the Tavor. Now, I think it's the best because it's arguably, of the readily available ones, one of the most battle-proven. The Tavor. I have run the Tavor. I do like the Tavor as far as bullpups go. Again, battle-proven. The Israelis use it to fight Islamic terrorists trying to wipe them off the map, and I hope that they continue to do so and be victorious. It's a good weapon. IWI is a good company. I get no sponsorship, no kickback on this show, but it's a solid weapons platform. Of all the bullpups out there, I like it. The most common one, I think, and the one that is largely issued in Israel, is going to be the 5.56 version. And that's a fine weapon for things that you want a 5.56 bullpup for. The one that got me thinking about this episode, though, is the 300 Blackout. We just did an episode on urban survival guns. You may want to go back and give that a listen if you have not already. But talking about the advantages of a bullpup in urban environments, in close, tight-in environments. I'm talking large buildings. I'm talking streets and alleyways. I'm talking vehicle convoy operations. There really is an advantage to the bullpup. You can get a short overall weapon with a full-length barrel. I think, as one of the patrons pointed out today, thanks Josh, it's even more of an advantage on our American market now because of the new pistol brace thing that's out. Whereas before I could get a pretty short gun with a pistol brace and it was pretty effective, that seems to be going away. This still allows me to get a very short overall weapon that's completely legal, not an NFA item. And it's even better as far as ballistics go because I get a much longer barrel and the same overall package, or a similar overall package, to a very small AR pistol, or short-barreled AR, whatever you want to call it. So I think this Tavor is a good choice for urban operations. I think it makes the most sense in one of those kind of environments. Also, a different cartridge than the 5.56, the 300 Blackout. No, I'm not in love with the 300 Blackout, but I like to judge soberly. Of all the places it would have an advantage, I think urban warfare is one of them. Right? You're talking about generally in close fighting. You're talking about a place where you may want it a little bit quieter when you're shooting, especially if you're doing some kind of clandestine operation, or you just don't want to blow out your eardrums getting out of an elevator and having to shoot somebody. Whatever the case might be, I could see the advantage of the subsonic round. Especially if you're talking like a subsonic round out of a 16-inch barrel that's going to be that much quieter than it would be out of a shorter barrel. Because more of that powder is getting burnt before it exits, which means less gas pressure leaving the end of the barrel, all other things being equal. So that Tavor and 300 Blackout seems like a really, really good, unique combination for urban warfare, urban fighting. So I think that's a really cool option. I should also mention, again, the Tavor does come in 5.56. It comes in 300 Blackout. It even comes in 9mm. If you want a really fun personal defense gun, PDW, You could make the argument that that's just as good and more affordable and a good option as well if you wanted a Bullpup PCC, a Bullpup pistol caliber carbine, the Tavor 9mm. That's a really cool option. And if you want to go heavy, if you want a, let's say, designated marksman urban warfare kind of rifle, they even make the Tavor in 7.62x51 NATO or 308. So if you wanted a heavy version, the Dragoon of the Bullpups in the Tavor, you might look at that. So whatever kind of ballistics you want in common calibers, it seems like they're pretty much offered in the Tavor. One of the downfalls, I think, of the Tavor, to be fair, you are getting a light handy gun with a full-length barrel. That's not an NFA item. So it's a short, maneuverable gun, but it's not necessarily a lightweight gun. Looking at the weight on their own website for a pretty standard 16.5-inch 5.56, weighing in at 7.9 pounds. 7.9 pounds is not light. That's more, I believe, than my 308 SCAR 17 Heavy in 308 Winchester, and likely going to be heavier than a majority of the AR M4 type carbines with the standard 16-inch barrel. So you're getting a perhaps more compact gun, but you're not getting a lighter weight gun in most instances. So just be aware of that. If you're looking for like a lightweight bug out option or something, this really isn't it. Again, if you're talking about convoy ops where you're going to be hopping out of a vehicle, fighting, hopping back in a vehicle in confined spaces, alleyways, you want a compact but full-length barrel gun to fight your way out of a city, to keep in your car, in your trunk, in a bag, may be a good option. But again, it's not lightweight. So think about that. I'm going to briefly mention the Steyr AUG, because it's a big name in bullpups. I think it lives in this in-between. They're not hen's teeth. You can still get them. They are still available, and I would say maybe in the 90s, early aughts, it would have been a decent option, but I think they've kind of been overshadowed by better bullpups. Again, if you want one, I don't say they're necessarily obsolete, but again, I think especially for the money, there are better options in bullpups, but they are a thing. There's nothing wrong with them. I just think they kind of got passed over and didn't really become as big a thing as they could have been. They were adopted by military forces, so if you're looking for another military proven one, I'd say the Steyr has that kind of street cred. And before I forgot it, I thought it would be worth a mention. If I was going to recommend another one, I would look at the DesertTech M.D.R. Now here is the cool thing about the DesertTech M.D.R. Mentioned the Tavor, you can get it in 5.56, 300 blackout, even get it in 308. Well, the cool thing about the DesertTech M.D.R. is you can swap out between those calibers, and not just a small frame like a 223 to a 300 blackout. You can swap out, I do believe, with the same chassis, with the same firing mechanism between, let's say, 223 and 308. They list a 223 Wild or Wildy chambering. If you don't know, that's a really cool chambering. That's kind of an in-between between 223 and 5.56. You can shoot either one, and they have a reputation for being more accurate than the 5.56 chambering. So you got the 223 Wild, 308, 300 Blackout, and 6.5 Creedmoor. So if you wanted kind of one chassis with multi-calibers, I'm reading off their website, the M.D.R.X can be converted within a few minutes to any of the available calibers, and then the calibers already listed. It even has a subheading on their website I'm looking at, the Ultimate Truck Rifle. Ultimate, I'm not sure about, but good, I'd say it'd be a good choice. Double check your history on this, but I do believe they're a pretty rugged, well-made bullpup. And much like the Tavor, not the lightest gun in the shed, 8.7 to 8.89 pounds. Even on the lighter end, again, I think that's a pound heavier than the SCAR Heavy. But if you're looking for a very modular bullpup, you want to go out and train and shoot with 5.56 and you want a 6.5 Creedmoor and you want to switch in between them, things like that, that's really cool. I'm not sure about the M.D.R.X, but I think the M.D.R. has been around for more than 3 years, thus meeting one of the requirements that I like in a go-to rifle. I like it to be proven. This one, although not perfect, seems to be hanging around, and I would test it for myself, but it seems to be a decent rifle, the Desert Tech M.D.R. Now those are going to be my 2 big recommendations if you're looking at getting into a bullpup. Next, I'm going to get into some that I'm not so sure about. If you're looking for a gun and you drink your own urine, maybe look to KelTec. That may seem like a bad joke, but this was actually one of their marketing campaigns for one of their bullpup rifles. The R.D.B survival rifle. It's a 5.56 rifle by KelTec. Advertising for those who drink their own urine. So, if that's you, and to be fair, I've been in some nasty situations. I can't tell you that I've never drinking urine before. But if that's you, if that's the kind of gun you want for those who drink their own urine, maybe look to the R.D.B survival rifle. It's kind of marketed as a survival rifle. It does look sleek and svelte. Now, I'm looking at 2 versions. The R.D.B Survival, which was the ones from those ad campaigns. Here's the cool thing about the KelTec. 5 pounds, 14 ounces. That is pretty lightweight, even compared to regular rifles. Not just compared to bullpups. Compared to bullpups, it's kind of a featherweight. Compared to even a lot of other carbines, it's a pretty lightweight rifle. You're getting at, so it's not an SBR 16-inch barrel, 16.1 per their website, a 1-in-7 twist, and it's in a common 223 5.5 by 45. So if you want to try one out, if you want a lightweight kind of bug out on foot, or you just want a less expensive way to get into bullpups, and try them out, see if you like them, you might look at the KelTec. It wouldn't be a recommendation if it was going to be your one go-to gunfighting gun, because I just don't know that it's proven enough. This is gunfighter life after all. It's not Plinkster life. But you may check out that KelTec. They have the Hunter version. Just a quick glance, it looks like the survival version comes with backup iron sights and a rail, and the Hunter version just comes with the rail that you can mount an optic on. And it has a 20.5-inch barrel, so you get not just a carbine length barrel, but a full rifle length barrel, if you're going by like M16, M4 standards. So that's the Hunter. But wait, there's more. They make a couple of more versions, the R.D.B Defender and the R.D.B 17. They look like more tactical versions. And wait, there's even a heavy hitter. This one I think just announced, the R.F.B. This one in 308 or 7.62 by 51. This one not so lightweight, 8.7 pounds. 18.5-inch barrel. That's a pretty good barrel length for a 308. So there are the KelTec bullpups. I don't think they make you drink your own urine before you buy one, so don't worry about that. Now we talked about kind of where this shines in urban operations. What if you wanted a bullpup for urban operations, but you wanted something more versatile than one of the rifles we discussed? What if you wanted a shotgun and you wanted it to be a bullpup? Well, they exist. There are a few that are on the market. I'm going to discuss ones that I think are decent and one's not so much. The one that comes to mind for me that I would recommend that's been around a while, the UTAS, or UTS 15. I was introduced to these years and years ago. They seem to be a decent design for a bullpup shotgun. Now, it seems like there's quite a few imported Turkish shotguns, and some of them are good and some of them are not. Some of the newer Bullpups I really don't know, but the UTAS 15 has been around for a minute, and it seems to be okay. It looks really big, but it doesn't handle like a big heavy gun. It handles pretty well. And again, I like firearms, if you're going to have them for defensive purposes, to be around and be proven. That being said, there is another. We talked about IWI in the rifle world. Well, IWI also makes a Bullpup shotgun. They make the Tavor TS-12. I gotta be honest, it's perhaps one of the ugliest modern firearms I've ever seen. It's a homely looking gun, but it's been around over 3 years, and it's still being made. IWI makes it. They're a decent company. I haven't heard anything about them not running well. Much like their rifles, it's not a light gun. 9 pounds. I say again, 9 pounds. Compare that to common 870s and 590s, but this is an episode about Bullpups. And it comes in OD green, which does something for the aesthetics. My second favorite color. So it does come in OD green, so there is that. And again, it's been around. It seems to be a proven design. And you might be saying, you forgot about the obvious one in the room. The KelTec K.S.G. I didn't forget. That section was ones I'm not sure about. Here's ones I would not recommend. I would not recommend the KelTec K.S.G. Now, I don't hate KelTecs. They make some good guns. The KelTec PF9 is a decent, affordable carry gun. The KelTec SU-16 is a fairly decent and lightweight handy carbine. My only experience with the K.S.G. has been negative. I don't find them to be very reliable. I don't find them to point well. KelTec makes good stuff, but the K.S.G. is not a gun I'm going to recommend in good conscience. It's just not one of them. Whereas their rifles, Bullpups, are kind of an unknown to me, and they are intriguing because they're so lightweight. The K.S.G. is not something I'm going to recommend. And you might be saying, well, what about the Springfield Helion? No. Much like their XDs, which are a Croatian gun that's imported and stamped with Springfield, the Springfield Helion is similar and imported here and stamped with Springfield. One, it has not been around for 3 years to be proven, and the vast majority of Springfields I would not recommend. I do not recommend most of Springfield's stuff. Now, to be fair, if you want a Springfield Bullpup, I think the only Springfield gun I would recommend is the Springfield M1A. So if you want a Springfield Bullpup, I'd say get an M1A and get one of the conversion stocks where you can convert it to a Bullpup. I don't know how good a gun it would be, but I would expect it to be at least as reliable as the original, assuming you don't mess with the operating system, you just move it backwards. So if you were looking for a Springfield Bullpup, I guess go with that one. Also on that note, if you have a Mini 14, a Ruger Mini 14, you can also convert those to be a Bullpup. So if you want to experiment with a Bullpup design and you have a Mini 14 laying around in the back of the safe or something that you're not using, you're not running, and you want to experiment with the Bullpup concept before you go drop over a Cougarand on one of these higher end go-to fighting Bullpups, you may look at doing that. You can always convert it back later. But there was a time when Bullpups were kind of a lot more the in thing than they are now. And they made these conversion kits, and they made them for the Mini 14. And I don't think they're overly expensive. You may be able to find a used one on eBay or something. Because it's just a stock and a kit, a conversion kit, not really an 4473 item. So if you're looking for a cheap way and you have a Mini 14, you may look at making a Mini 14 Bullpup. Again, just to run it and see if you like the Bullpup concept. You can always put it back later, assuming you don't break something. Now, I said we might mention at the end. Bullpup pistols. There is at least one that I know of that has been mildly successful and that it has been around more than 3 years and it's still being made, although it's not like overtaken Glock in the market share. And much like the advantage you get from having a longer barrel and a shorter package in a rifle, you get the same thing with the handgun. It's kind of hard to explain, but go look it up in visual if you want. But instead of the normal way that the slide moves back and grabs a round from the rear of the magazine and shoves it forward, there's kind of a grabbing mechanism that, if you looked at it, almost looks like the magazine is built backwards, and it pulls the round out of the back of the magazine and puts it in the chamber. That saves some legitimate space that can be used in the barrel. And if you know anything about hollow points and handguns, they can be finicky when it comes to barrel length. A good hollow point that expands out of one barrel length may not expand out of a shorter barrel because they're velocity based. This allows you to get a longer barrel and a shorter overall package. And you can get this in the Boberg. Boberg has been around a while. I think it's been bought by Bond Arms, which is not a bad company. I don't know that there's any fundamental change in the design of the weapon. I think it just got bought out by another company. They even have stamped on the slide Bond Bullpups. If you look at it, it looks like it would have a very, very short barrel, but when you read the specs, it has a 3.35 inch barrel, which is respectable on like a micro compact 9mm size gun. If you look at it, the barrel doesn't stick much farther out than the trigger guard. But again, it's a 3.35 inch barrel per their website. If you think of kind of the quintessential mid-size carry gun, a Glock 19, it has a 4-inch barrel, 4.016, I guess technically. But this one has a 3.35 inch barrel, and it looks completely different. It looks like a much, much smaller gun. So depending on you and your carry style and your kind of taste in firearms, it's a really cool concept. And again, it's been around a bit. It wasn't like some experimental R&D thing that got dropped because it didn't work. I wouldn't say that it maybe is as reliable as a Glock 19, but I don't know that. But the fact that it's still being made and it's been around for years, and it doesn't seem to have any giant glaring problems, I think it puts it on the list for a viable bullpup handgun. And the only real one that I can think of that's a viable option for an actual defensive tool. Anyway, not an exhaustive list, but hopefully we covered most of the common bullpups. Now, we talked about urban operations. Part of that can be the use of flashbangs. I'm certainly familiar with the use of flashbangs. They flash, and then they go bang. You might be thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I'm not sanctioned by the state to be able to get a flashbang. Well, there are civilian legal flashbangs. I looked into this as the commander of a tactical team because in some of the areas we worked, if we stopped an active shooter in the use of a flashbang but set the building on fire and killed a bunch of people, that's not really a win for us, right? The whole point of stopping the active shooter is to prevent the loss of innocent life. And if you know anything about actual flashbangs, they are kind of known for starting fires. And doing that in a large, and I'm talking a large metropolitan area with thousands and thousands of people, starting a fire on one of those buildings is not really acceptable. So we looked into some other flashbangs, and there are civilian legal flashbangs. Although that's pretty cool, that's not the tip. Whether it's a frag or a flashbang, one of the techniques, situationally dependent if you're going to use one if you've never have. Have you ever seen, like on the movies, and I hate to use those kind of references, but like where they throw the grenade and then they throw it back? It kind of reminds me of in the movies where you see somebody like put the gun out in somebody's face and they grab the gun away. Well, that's not how you use a gun in CQB. You hold it close to your body so that nobody can grab it from you. You don't put it right in front of their face with your arm extended, which is why a lot of those gun takeaways you just kind of shake your head at. But anyway, going back to the grenade, you don't just toss it in the room so that they can toss it back. You throw that thing like you want to launch your arm off of your body. You throw that thing as hard as you can and you bounce it so that it continues to bounce off the floor, off the wall, off whatever, that it continues to bounce up until the time that it detonates, making it much, much harder to grab. Think about that. Do you want to just toss it in the room where they can potentially grab it and toss it back, or kick it underneath a bed, or whatever the case is? Or do you want to throw it so hard that it bounces off walls, doors, goes skidding across the floor, so that it's much, much harder for them to get a hold of? Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. How about Revelation 19:11? In righteousness he judges and makes war. The he there is Christ Jesus, Yeshua Messiah. If you are going to use force, you had better use it lawfully and justly. There are plenty of cases for justifiable use of force laid out in the Bible, when it's right, when it's wrong. For instance, it is written, "You shall not murder." It is also written, "If a thief is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed." In righteousness he judges and makes war. So you men, do likewise. As Ecclesiastes says, there is a time for peace and a time for war. Make sure you know the right time. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.